Hello, Red Nail Energy listeners. This is Mikhail, and today I have with me Kelsey. Kelsey is an intuitive life and business coach, speaker, and spiritual healer who blends spirituality with strategy. She's also the owner of Everme Co, a writer, and in pursuit of a master's degree in depth psychology and creativity. She believes if we focus too much on strategy, then we're trying to live life by the book, and that book is often written by someone else for someone else. If we focus too much on spirituality, we often lose our connection to the practical purpose we have here on earth. Kelsey is exceptionally gifted at bringing these two worlds together, and she will teach you how to do the same. Kelsey splits time between Dana Point, California and St. Paul, Minnesota with her husband, Dane, and their dog, Pico. Welcome to the podcast, Kelsey.
Thank you, Mikhail.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you on. And we have had the opportunity to speak on previous podcasts. And then I've also had the wonderful opportunity to be part of a writing group that you put on and some of the other connecting groups that you lead. And so I'm really excited to introduce you to this audience. I just think that they're going to eat everything you say up. And I'm already excited for our conversation.
Yes, I'm very excited. I've been looking forward to this for a while now. So hello to all the people who are new to me.
Yeah, amazing. Well, why don't you go ahead and just give a little introduction, kind of what led you to where you are and some of the gifts that you share with the world now. Yeah, let's just jump in.
Yeah. I love this question because in my mind, I'm like, okay, how far back do I want to begin? And it's like this, you can hear like a dial turning and then it's like, ding, okay, start there.
Yes.
So let's give that a moment. Let's start on the professional side of things. So I own Everme Co. I've been a professional coach for over the last almost 8.5 years. And that endeavor really started from a couple of things. One, being in roles that I was really good at, but not necessarily finding fulfillment or purpose in. And two, a just intuitive curiosity to two questions. What is it like to be a business owner? And what is it like to be a coach? So I like to share with folks that sometimes the questions that are placed in your heart and your mind are like leading indicators of maybe what is next for you. And if you're brave enough to follow those questions and start to dig up some answers, they could lead to some really cool things. That's how I got into Everme Co. I'm motivated by a lot of different things. You mentioned gifts. I want to be the fullest expression of myself as I can be. So I'm also a big believer in honing in on what are you really good at? What do you feel called to do? What really lights you up? And then activating those things in different ways so that you can feel a sense of fulfillment, purpose, passion, in all ways, not just professionally, because I do believe your purpose or your calling extends into every arena of your life, not just your professional. What questions do you have? Because I know you always have great questions.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I would love to hear about what the moment was like that you finally took the leap to leave the corporate world and kind of what that transition looked like for you.
Yeah. Well, let's be really clear here. I have left corporate multiple times. The first time that I left, I thought I knew everything, thought I knew what I was doing, thought it was going to be like an instant success because I leapt and the net was going to appear, and life happens in a lot of different ways. I was not ready for that. I did not have the skills or the thick skin that was needed to do that. Fast forward a few years, I did eventually leave corporate. I have been out of corporate and full-time in my business now for over 2 years, which is mind-blowing to me. And I would say the catalyst in each instance was just the phrase that I use to describe it is like a willingness to bet on myself. And even though the first time I left corporate, it didn't exactly work how I wanted it to, it proved to me a lot in terms of my ability to believe in myself, my ability to trust myself, and to know how to course correct if and when I needed to. Because like I said, I think what I'm here to do is so much more bigger than my professional expression. Though it has been a joy to be on my own these last 2 years because it's a dream that I have worked toward for 8+ years.
Yeah. Your embodiment of that energy of betting on yourself is so contagious. And I will also say, having been on the receiving end of your presence while still in a corporate role and then choosing to take the leap out of it, it's also confronting, because I don't think that you are scared to ask the hard questions. And I've been fortunate enough to be in Conscious Connections, which is kind of like a small group you lead, where at the end, a lot of times people can bring up things they're facing. And there are even times that someone else is experiencing something that is so far from anything I'm experiencing, and your questions to them will feel confronting to me in ways that maybe I'm playing it small, not betting on myself, oftentimes knowing the answer of what needs to be done, but being too scared to do it. And then finally having somebody that creates a container of saying, like, why not? Why not you? What's holding you back, in a sense? What caused you to embody that? Or like, what does that energy feel like for you personally, but then to be able to kind of transfer that into other people and sort of hold the mirror to them, I guess, in ways to bear witness to their own gifts and their own talents?
Yeah. I love that you use the word mirror, because that's exactly what I was thinking of. Like, just a side note, in today's day and age where everyone is triggering somebody else and we're setting boundaries and blocking each other off, and heightened polarity amongst us, our collective, the reality is that we are each other's mirrors, and we are each other's gift givers in that sense. My story, very similar to part of your story, is life is really short. We don't know how much time we have on this planet. I unfortunately have lost many people unexpectedly, and that changed and continues to change the trajectory of my life. I understand that our time here is limited. I do not know how much time I have. I will probably never be privy to that information. So, because of that, I'm very motivated to make the most of the time that I have here on this flying rock, because that's important to me. At the end of my life, I want to feel fulfilled. I want to feel like I was purposeful and dutiful and showed up for the people in the world around me.
Mhm.
That's a motivating factor for me personally, but in terms of being that guide and that role within other people's lives and journeys, I, a lot of what I do stems from where I've been. And if I can remove obstacles or things that are holding women back from taking the chances to bet on themselves, I'm doing my life's work, because when women do that, mountains move.
Mhm.
And I believe that to my very core. Um, and I'm motivated to do it, but I'm also extremely gifted at it. So I long have been an advice giver, a space holder, a facilitator, a connector. These are all things that I've done since I was a little kid. And it's just been this like really cool way of pulling it all together and using it, a lot in business, but in my personal life as well. And yeah, it's a very regenerative gift, because the more I give, the more I get, and vice versa.
Yeah. Something else I've noticed about your ability in sharing, holding space, giving advice is that you don't try so hard to use your own words to fill up the room. A lot of the time, you kind of reflectively listen and then allow someone to sit in the discomfort of having to think about an answer to maybe a simple question you've asked. Did you ever find yourself, I guess, oversharing or overgiving or filling that space? And then how did you learn how to be a little bit more observational and intentional with what you choose to share or what you choose to bring forth?
Yeah, a couple of things kind of shook that up for me. So before I started my coaching certification, I thought a coach was very much this like um, uh, forceful, outward. I'm going to give you advice. I'm going to tell you what to do. And the modality that I was trained in was very much about question asking, eliciting your internal answers. Like, so it switched from this very like masculine outward thing to teaching me how to use my skills in a more feminine way to draw out what is already there. With that being said, I'm also, like I said in my intro, I'm also a very curious being. So actually asking questions is a strength of mine, because I'm thinking them anyway. So I might as well spit them out and share them. The other thing with that is I've learned, and this ties into human design, which I think we'll talk a little bit about, but through my human design, I'm a projector, and we can get into that in a little bit what that means. But part of what that means is being a guide. I'm not here to be this forceful, I'm going to tell you everything to do, here's my prescriptive way of being. When I stepped into my projector energy, it really allowed me to then just double, triple underline those gifts of being able to hold space, ask questions, stay really quiet until something bubbles up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really remarkable to be in the presence of, because the energy that is created and felt even virtually is really transformative. And I think, as you said, so often we find ourselves in containers of this very masculine, let me tell you how much I know, let me make sure you know I deserve to be here, all these things. And being in space with you in a coaching or more of that container was the first time I'd experienced that reciprocity and feeling like the energy was really flowing amongst everyone. And it was so transformative. I mean, truly a catalyst for me choosing to quit my job. And I think that it was interesting because it was a writing group for authors writing a book. And yet 2-3 sessions in, I was like, I have an announcement. I left the corporate world, but at the same time, I think the power of energy and Reiki and the coaching space that you create really is so unique. And that for me has been what has drawn me over and over again to be able to collaborate with you or work with you and learn from you, because it's so different from what I've experienced in the past. I'd love for you to kind of share, in case anyone's interested in working with you in the future or joining any of these small groups that you have, what are some of the other things that kind of set that apart, or what some of the goals or the outcomes are that you have for the people you work with?
The reality and what I've come to learn over the last 8 years is, in a container or in these different parts of our life, we might say that we are focused on making more money or writing a book or changing our careers or trusting our intuition more, but there is always something underneath the surface. And my art is creating a space in which, yeah, we can talk about those things, but what I'm really creating and curating is an experience for that undercurrent to flow without impediment.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there's this surface level experience of what we're talking about, but I'm always curious about what's unseen, what's kind of under the radar, because that is truly where the magic happens. That's where all the gold is. Yeah, and thank you for being so complimentary of my work, because it is it is my life's work, and it's very important to me to make
really
sure that
yeah. It really is. And I love that you celebrate that, and then in turn celebrate and help be a mirror to other people's gifts. I think too often, again, a coaching space might be like you said, I'm going to kind of talk at you. I have all the answers and I know everything. And it's instead it's so leveled, where it's all of us are doing our best on this floating rock and trying to figure things out. And if we can find spaces to uncover some of those deeper things within us, that is where the magic happens. If somebody is maybe not quite ready to do more of that coaching work, or they just want a little taste, what are some of the things that you do or would recommend people do if they want to access some of that kind of deeper magic that occurs when we create space to feel it, or, for it to be there?
Yeah. Journaling is my go-to place to start. So I do a practice called Morning Pages. It's from Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. Also, I highly recommend someone reading and going through that book, because it is life-changing. I've gone through it, I don't know, probably close to 10 times at this point in the time. Morning Pages is the act of 3 pages of freehand writing every morning. To me, that is my form of meditation. So it's simple. I always have my journal, my pen. I spend time in the morning writing. If you don't have the time in the morning, you can do afternoon pages or evening pages. The point of it, though, is to have a place in which you can clear out that mental chatter. So your morning pages aren't meant to be poetic, though they might be. They're not meant to be pretty, though they might be. They're not even meant to be deep, but they might be. It's just a form of taking care and tending to your soul so that you can drop deeper. You can go to places you maybe didn't think you could go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And in a world with so much distraction, you are so intentional, and it feels like constantly creating those habits, the morning pages, time for creativity or curiosity when it comes to art and creation. How do you stay true to yourself in that? Or how do you have like the discipline, I guess, because it's so easy to say, I'm going to start this habit. And then it's so much easier to open up TikTok and just scroll for hours on end. Like, what's the difference for you in actually sticking to some of those things?
Yeah. Two things stand up. One, and I don't know exactly when this happened, but I just got to the point where I was like, I am so sick of anyone or thinking anyone knows better than I do about my life. And when that mindset shift happened, it was like, I'm going to do things my way.
Mhm.
I'm going to listen to my intuition and create my life based on what works for me. The second thing is I'm going to get on a soapbox a little bit here on about habits in general. First and foremost, if you have not completed a habit audit recently, I would do that, because some of your habits that you think are quote unquote good for you or things that you should be doing are actually very detrimental to you. Health, wellness, mindset, spirituality. Like, there's so many different things that we're told we should do that they might be good on paper, but they may not be serving you and or helping you get to places you want to go. Mm-hmm. With that in mind, one thing that I have done is I've been very I treat my habits with a deep level of reverence and from a very sacred perspective. So I only take on daily habits that are like excellent habits for me, that have been well researched, well tested out, and they prove fruitful for me. So essentially right now it's morning pages and it's daily running. Oh, and I don't drink alcohol. That's my other daily to do. Don't do that. So I'm very sacred about habits. The last thing I'll say though is if you're trying to incorporate something new or a habit like morning pages or something, daily movement or starting a business or whatever the thing is you're trying to integrate in, I encourage people to start even smaller than you're thinking. Like, stop putting this pressure on of like, you have to do this daily or you have to do this once a week. Like, go even slower than that, like once a month. Or can you do this 4 times in 1 year? The reason being is not because slower is better, though sometimes it's more advantageous. It's because start small enough so that you can trust yourself in these little actions, because that self-trust is you need that for every other leap, bound, jump, skip you're going to take in the future. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I see a lot of people drown in their habits because it's too overwhelming. It doesn't get integrated in. Oh, to hell with this. I'm going to get on TikTok instead, like your example. And it puts a bad taste in our mouth, and then we're not trusting ourselves.
Yeah. And I almost wonder if some of that is that inner desire to feel shame and to punish ourselves is like creating these things that we aren't able to do to then allow ourselves, because often we're so starved of feeling, and then we create these spaces where we just feel shame or we feel angry or we feel like we aren't good enough, and then we create this self-fulfilling prophecy where it's like, well, see, look, I said I was going to run 10 miles a day for 100 days straight and I wasn't able to do it. And it's like, almost as you said, creating things that we can be successful at and then actually sitting in the feeling of being successful. I don't think often people celebrate themselves or allow themselves to accomplish things and purposely, maybe subconsciously, sabotage that and set themselves up for failure just to prove that prophecy of, see, I'm not good enough. And I think it's really interesting, your point on that, to really reel it back and like only create these habits that you are able to be successful. So then you can say, okay, more of that and more of that versus, look, I'm a failure. I'm just going to throw it all out the window.
Yeah. And a part of that I will say too is like, know what success truly means to you in each habit that you pick, because what I will see people do is, I want to wake up every day at 5 a.m. and go for a workout because then I'm going to be in better shape and that's successful to me. Well, they do it for a month. They hate it because it doesn't work with their energy and they're not in shape, and then they're not successful. So then they don't celebrate it. And again, like I said earlier, the thing that you want to be successful, or that definition of it, like, be very honest and real about why you are pursuing what you're pursuing so that you do have something to measure at the end of it objectively. Was this successful or not? Mm-hmm. Be mindful and intentional of what success is just as much as how am I spending my time? What is this habit?
And allow yourself to be a little bit more in that flow versus all or nothing. Whereas you said, okay, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. every day. Well, you wake up at 5 a.m. 6 of the 7 days of the week, and one day it's 5:05 a.m. Is that a failure? Oftentimes it's like, all right, to hell with it. I can't do it. And so I love that approach of just being a little more curious and playful, and then working with your own energetics and listening to your body, and knowing that sometimes a rest day is exactly what you need versus some of those really forceful programs or challenges that are like, no matter what, you're going to stick to this. And that to me goes so far away from our intuition, which I think we should kind of segue into. But I'd love to hear a little bit about, your intuitive habit forming, but then also just how you use intuition in general kind of to guide your day.
Yeah. I use intuition in every aspect of my life. The first place that I start for any decision, big or small, is what does my gut say about this? Mm-hmm. For a long time, that wasn't the case. The first place I started was, what does my head say about this? Mm-hmm. What does my logical, rational, high-achieving brain say about this? And that got me to dead end after dead end after dead end. So again, in my pursuit, and there has to be a better way for me to go through life, I leaned on intuition, and that has served everything in my life. It is what I do in my business. It is what I do in my personal life. It is how I make, literally, like I said, decisions, from small, tiny, micro decisions to the very big, grand life decisions. For me, a couple of things I'll say about intuition. One is, you are probably more intuitive than you realize. The thing that I see people struggle with is not tapping into their intuition. It's actually listening to their intuition and being willing to take action on it, to trust themselves enough to follow their intuition. The second thing, there's a lot of different, all roads lead to Rome kind of thing, of connecting to your intuition and going deeper with that. And if you want, we can talk about some of that intuitive development work. The last thing I'll say about your intuition is, for me as a woman, starting with my intuition is a true honoring of my energy, of what I'm here to do, who I'm here to be. Like it felt like finally coming home, and a place where I could be safe, and a place where I could be myself. And it truly like turned everything inside out for me, because it finally felt like I was seeing the world as I was meant to see it, versus how someone else told me I should see it, what worked for somebody, 80 years ago, who's not like me at all. Mm-hmm. It gave me permission to really be myself.
Yeah. And I mean, what an experience to be, say, sitting on the beach with a blindfold on, and the people around you are just telling you what it looks like. And then the minute you actually take it off and you see it for yourself, it's indescribable. We could try our best to put into words all of these different things. But again, it's, to me, a sense that we have that is untapped when we allow it to be covered. But somebody else around us can sit there and explain to us what something smells like, feels like, tastes like, whatever it is. But when the sense is taken away, or it's dulled, or it's not listened to, it isn't of use to us, really. And so I would love to dive in a little bit on that intuitive development and things that have helped strengthen yours, because as you said, so often people will maybe even in hindsight be like, I freaking knew it. I knew it from the beginning. Or like, in that job interview, I had this gut feeling and I couldn't explain it. And that for me has been the biggest roadblock, that I've really tried to just stop trying to explain it. When I have that feeling, it does no good to be like, well, because right here in my stomach, it said no, or whatever. It's like, there sometimes is no way of explaining why it feels like you should take the back road instead of the freeway, or why you should leave 5 minutes later, or push this meeting to the next day, or whatever it may be, trivial or large life decision. And yet it's like, the more we're able to lean into that, the more it actually becomes second nature to be like, oh, actually, I'm just going to move this to this day. Actually, I'm not able to make that. And I do think that we are so blessed when we start to kind of trend that direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I got sick of my hindsight being so clear. Mm-hmm. It was like, if my hindsight can be this clear, why can't my foresight be this clear?
Yeah.
But we are a very skeptical society. We over trust the rational, and we under trust the intuitive. And so, I've been on this personal vendetta of like turning that inside out. A couple things I'll say is, you're exactly right. What you're talking about is having a heightened level of awareness for when your intuition is speaking to you. So that's usually the first place to start. I just want you to pay attention to it more. you might not be ready to trust it, or you might think this is like totally like, I don't really like this phrase, but like woo woo, and that's not going to work. And I've got real rational, logical things to do. But start to bring awareness to it and notice for your own sake, how often you hear something and do another. And is that the type of person you want to be? Do you want to be the type of person who's constantly going against her truth?
Yeah.
Maybe you do.
Inventory. Yeah.
Yes. So starting there, you have heard me say this a million times. Now my new friends will hear me say this a million times, but the equation that I use is simple. It goes intuition plus action equals magic. You have the intuitive knowing, you take some sort of action, you do something with it. Like, this isn't just meant to say like, stay in this mystical, numinous, intangible world forever. It's like, take that information that you're getting and do something about it. Like you said, reschedule the meeting, turn left instead of turning right, like start taking action on it. And that magic piece is this experience that I'm currently living of, I am constantly co-creating with my intuition how this is going to unfold moving forward. And it is such a more beautiful and in-depth expression of my life than I ever had before, when it was just only action or only intuition, because I've been there too, and it's a different world. And yeah, the last thing I'll say is just in terms of trust, that equation is what builds the trust of your intuition. So you don't get to get out of this unscathed. Like, I do need you to have some skin in the game and work with your intuition, listen to it, do what it says, or do something similar to what it says, and start to run your own experiment of what is working. How do you listen to your intuition? What does it sound like? A big thing that people struggle with in the beginning is like, is it my intuition or is it my anxiety? Is it my intuition or is it my ego? And you have to start to discern that for yourself. And the metaphor that I use, if it's helpful, is I liken those different voices, those different experiences, to types of fabric. So hang on with me with this one. If it is your intuition, for me, that feels very velvety, rich, grounded. If it's my anxiety, it feels like burlap, scratchy, like a wool sweater that doesn't feel good. If it's overthinking, I'm probably feeling like, what's that really crinkly fabric that's like on a lot of like dresses? Like, it's like
tulle or.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. It's just like, like it serves a purpose, but it's not like, you don't want to be like covered in it. And the reason I go to fabrics is because I want you just attaching these voices to things you're familiar with. So that as they come up, you can kind of level set with yourself and say like, oh, what does that feel like?
Right. Yeah. And feeling is obviously the root of intuition. So that's the other thing, is you can't really put a word where it's like intuition will whisper yes, and anxiety will scream, you're going to die. Like, there's not really a way that you can verbalize it, almost, because I do think that intuition can warn us. I do also think intuition is never going to try to harm us or try to control our mind in a way. Like, if we start going down rabbit holes unfounded of like, what if this bad thing happens? The what if scenarios often for me feel a lot more anxious or anxiety based, whereas the interesting kind of deep knowing, like sinking into something and just feeling like, yeah, I'm not going to do that, but just, and not really, again, not feeling scared of not doing it or scared of doing it, but instead feeling, as you said, that kind of velvety, soft, kind of more cozy feeling that is deeper versus that prickly external, like, I got to get away from this, might be more of the anxiety talking.
Yes. Yeah. And there's like fine lines within that too, because the thing I like to say is that, there's a thing right now that's like, be delulu, or like, I don't know, just like forget that we do have this like grounded earthly life, and your intuition may guide you into places and situations that you do have a level of fear on, or you do need to call in a different level of courage. Like, it's not just rainbows and butterflies when you're living an intuitive life. It is a very full, all-encompassing experience of life. It's not blocking out anything. It's not bypassing anything. And it may lead you down roads that will present challenges if you're willing to follow it.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing as well is that your intuition plus action equals magic. that equation, you also have to be willing in the action stage to have new intuition and create new action, and not be so rigid with, my intuition said this, now this is the action and I'm going to white knuckle this action. Because something I've seen your evolution of your business and some of the different containers you've created and challenges you've done and groups you've done, if you had just started from the first day you had a ping about this community you wanted to create, and then you never let yourself pivot from that, so much magic wouldn't have happened. And that's something I think I constantly try to go back to as well, is like, let myself pivot, go back to the intuition and create new action, instead of like, this plus this equals this, and I can only do it this one way.
Yeah. And that's a great reflection too. And I should share, like, Everme is a word I made up, and it means the evolution of you. So who we were when we started this call is different than who you and I are right now. Who I was 5 weeks ago is different than who I am right now. And who I will be a year from now is very different than who I am right now. Like, we are always evolving, and to be in a state of resistance against that, and to be so narrow-minded on it, like, only I can have this one intuition and this one, like, that's where we cause like so much like discomfort and suffering in ourselves. Because the truth is that life is change. We are always evolving. Something new is always going to come up. And the more you can learn to work with that and lean into it versus resist it, the more that magic comes in.
Yes, absolutely. Along with that, with some of the kind of maybe trusting without being able to see around the corner and using that intuition to guide, you've spoken on kind of the wealth consciousness aspect with intuition. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. That to me really ties to what I was saying earlier, that when we are in the pursuit of wealth, when we are in this pursuit of abundance, when we are in the pursuit of money, there is always this underlying thing that's actually what we want.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about the tie between intuition and money, the reality is that your intuition is prompting you to something. My intuition has never once said to me, go make $500 today. My intuition has said to me, you are in a pursuit of purpose. You are here to do great things. If you reach out to this person, it will be a fruitful conversation for you. Mm-hmm. So the underlying things is your intuition talking to you. It's telling you, kind of like giving you your why, or like your root cause of desire. And the wealth consciousness is this like very 3D tangible thing that we have to work with here. And one of the ways in which we do that is through money, is through abundance. And I think what's so important about this is that besides minding and understanding that you do have this undercurrent of these things that you want, particularly from a financial perspective, you have this tool, your intuition, that is going to help guide you there. And this actually has been studied. There was a study done with people who were picking stocks. And when they had a smaller number of stocks to pick from, they used their intuition and they picked really well. But as the number of stocks increased and they continued to use their intuition, it actually proved to be more fruitful for there was two groups, an intuitive group and a logical group. And as the number of stocks increased, the more options, basically, the intuitive group outperformed the logical group. And why that's reflective to what we're talking about right now is that you and I both know life is that example with all the stocks, all the different options.
Mm-hmm. You have to narrow it in.
It's been proven that you can have success, particularly from a financial standpoint, when trusting and using your intuition.
Yeah, absolutely. And taking money or beauty or power or the thing that, like you said, is maybe on the surface, taking that out of being the main focus. If every single day you just have blinking over and over in your mind, I need to make $500, I need to make $500, you're probably going to act out of integrity in order to do that. If that's the only purpose you have at the end of the night, is saying somehow you figured out how to do that. But B, it's so remarkable when we move that to maybe the side stage. It doesn't mean like abandon everything and burn your house down and go live on the streets because you just don't need anything. That's not it at all. But I think I've learned that when my focus is aligned with my intuition and with my purpose or my passion, some of those other things just figure themselves out. And I'm like, man, I'm really glad I didn't sit there, because I wouldn't have even came up with this outcome in the equation. I wouldn't have been able to think this up on my own. And yet if I had only been focusing on $500 by 5 p.m., it's like, man, how many people go day in and day out really out of alignment with themselves for some outcome they're chasing that doesn't really even matter in the big scheme of things, and definitely doesn't matter if life ends abruptly, as both you and I know it can. You know, what a shame to look back and say that's how you spent your last however many days.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's, you know, I'm also a Taurus, so I'm very interested in material, in making money and having success in that way. And I think the powerful tool that is coming through here is that like you can do that intuitively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can do it logically too.
Mm-hmm.
But
But
I
when
would
you've
rather have
been in
more
that
fun doing
world,
it.
exactly, and done it logically, and that was for me almost another catalyst, is I reached success in the quote corporate world financially way more than I ever would have imagined to. Abundance kind of just like came to my feet, and I realized I still didn't have the purpose. I still didn't have the passion. I was waking up dreading what I was doing and realizing something's got to give, and you have to kind of give up that super cush salaried life, you know, in order to kind of break those ceilings and figure out what else is out there. But I almost had to quote have it all and still feel like something was missing to be willing to bet on myself and say, okay, listen, I've done the thing I thought I was supposed to do. I've checked all those boxes. I've got the degree. I've done these things, you know, and then I've had the titles, and now some of the confrontation I'm forced with at times, because those were things I could easily throw out there and make myself feel really big in a room of people. Oh, this is the title I have, and I can hold my head high and all of these things. And now it's really cool to be able to say, like, my job title should be the least interesting thing about me. What I'm doing in my professional setting is the least. I don't want to talk about that. Like, let's talk about some of those things, as you said, below the surface where the magic happens.
Yeah.
And I don't want to find myself in those rooms where we're just walking around saying our titles, you know. It's just,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And the last thing, maybe the last thing I'll say about like the tie to money and wealth and things like that. At this day and age, a lot of money is unseen. You can't see money any more than you can see intuition. So, with that in mind, going back to the energetics of this, like energy is everywhere. Most of it is unseen. If you are willing to trust in money, like there's money in the bank right now. I can't see it, but it's there, right? Intuition is coming through. I can't see it, but it's there. These things have a lot of parallels to them. Like intuition, intuitive life is not all that different than other very common, more like normal, grounded parts of our lives.
Yeah. And how are we spending our energy? Because often we are maybe living outside our means, in a sense that we're spending it way more than we're doing the things that bring it in. And we don't often pause to ask ourselves if we're in an energetic deficit. Are we in debt energetically? No one really talks about that. And the focus is, I'm not in debt in this like fake money. Again, like you said, I can't see it. I'm swiping my credit card. I'm doing these things. It's not a tangible thing. It's an energetic in its own sense.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that's a really interesting way to think about it. And, you know, would challenge people listening to do a little bit of an energetic inventory and figure out if the habits you're doing, are they spending or are they giving? Or, you know, there's always that kind of give and take, and figuring out ways that we can find a little more of a balance or an abundance there, which is very possible to us because it's all around.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned Taurus, and that kind of leads us in. I'd love for you to talk about your human design, which is somewhat astrologically tied, but explaining to listeners what human design is if they're unfamiliar, and then some of the ways you've used it to really guide others and then harness your own talents and skills.
Yeah. Yeah. So the way I always describe it is I'm going to say something and then I'm going to take it immediately back, but it just helps frame what it is.
Okay.
Human design is like a personality assessment. Okay. Now you kind of know what it is. Now pretend I never said that because you cannot influence your human design. Your human design is based on when you entered into this world. So your birth date, where you were born, what time. That's the tie to astrology and things like that. Human design is a very complex system, but the way in which you can use it is I see a lot of people find it to be beneficial because it gives them language on who they are, or maybe who they forgot that they were. So when you think about when you entered this world, there was, you know, you came here for a purpose. You came here, you know, kind of clean slate, depends on how you feel about past lives and things like that. And then what happened, right? You got into this world, you were influenced, you were conditioned, you were taught, you were, in community, in family, in friendship, all these things contributed into like who you are. Sometimes that comes in the form of telling you who you are. And human design is a form of undoing all of that so that you can get to that place of being able to say, no, this is who I am. This is why I have influenced myself to be this way. Not, I was a high achieving student because mom and dad expected me to be that. It's breaking out of those molds maybe and those roles that you have filled because of external factors.
Mm-hmm.
Within human design, there's 5 different types that you can be. And then there's so many like sub factors underneath there that give you indications on who you are and what makes you unique. I've been reading human design charts for, I think, like 4 years, and I have yet to come across any 2 charts that are the same. So it really is reflective of just like the uniqueness of who you are and your energy and what you bring to the table. The way in which I work with human design, outside of course, self-study, getting to know yourself better, starting to unwind some of that conditioning, is I use a portion of your human design chart as that place of intuitive connection. So within your human design chart, there's something called, if you look up your chart, it'll be called your authority. And that's typically my starting point, because if I can have you connect to your authority and connect to, perhaps that is the way your intuition speaks to you the loudest in the world of human design, then we can start to like tip these dominoes over. You're listening to your authority more. You're listening to that inner voice. You're starting to trust it, be aware of it, pay attention to it, start to trust it, act on it, things like that. So to me, human design is like the tip of this like huge iceberg. And of course, in that metaphor, there's so much underneath the surface, yes, that we need to still tend to, but it's often a starting point for intuitive development, intuitive trust, self-trust, getting to know who you were before the world told you who you should be.
Cool. And what would be an example or 2 of like an authority and how that would come into play or allow somebody to get to know and work with that component?
Yeah. So 2 of the most common types, one is called sacral authority and the other is emotional authority. Emotional authority is exactly what it sounds like. You make decisions, you connect to your intuition through your feelings. In sacral authority, you are connecting through like that classic gut feeling. One thing that stands out with sacral authority is that they really benefit from yes or no questions. So we go, back to what I shared about my coaching certification. I was taught to ask open-ended questions. It should start with what or how. And then I emerge in the world of human design. And it's like, no, there's a whole group of people who just really benefit from yes or no questions.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you work with your authority. The thing I will say though, is this is all in the box of human design. So even I love human design as much as I do. Intuition trumps human design. Mm-hmm. So you know yourself best. Mm-hmm. You get to interface and interact and push back on human design, just like you can in any other arena.
Do you ever find anybody receives their human design or kind of does a reading with you and starts to work through it and they disagree or don't feel as connected, but then like over time as they work through it, they do some of that unpatterning and then connect more with it? Or what's that experience been like?
Yes, definitely. I mean, that was my own experience. When I first pulled my chart, I looked at it and I was like pissed. I was like, this is dumb. I don't know what I just read, but I hate this. Mm-hmm. That's very common with new projectors. And I've done readings. I mean, I just had a reading this week where someone was like, no, I disagree with that. And yeah, and the thing I say about that point of disagreement is discernment. Is it really not for you, or is it a place of resistance? Mm-hmm. Like something to lean in more toward. But yes, it's a very, it's a gift that keeps on giving, because every time I dive back into my chart, I'm like, oh, like it is such a gift to see language that says who you are and that touches that such a deep, intimate chord of your life. But you always see it with fresh eyes. So like I said, we're always evolving. So every time I go back to my chart, it's like, wow, I'm a new me today, reading this almost like for the first time. And it's so illuminating. Yeah. And I just love that feeling too. Like that energetically, like
just kind of fills you up. Yeah. And I'd even be curious, if when you talk about this authority, say somebody is kind of naturally more emotional or their environment has caused them to be emotional. And so they really impulsively make decisions and kind of like they would they would label themselves as an emotional authority. But then when they are maybe sacral, the exercise could be, what if you wait until you get to a space of stillness and calmness and sit with yourself and ask what decision you want to make in this situation? And I bet it's so vastly different from that knee jerk, like, this is what I feel like I need to do. And so I'm sure learning that is really helpful just for people as they move forward, and to kind of try something different and just see what they feel and be playful and curious about it, which I love. Everything that you do, all the tools you talk about, it's always very much like, take what resonates, leave what doesn't, like, be curious about this, be childlike about it, versus so, stern and inflexible, and this is how it has to be. And so I think all of these tools just bring more magic to our life and opportunity to get to know ourselves better, which is really fun.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And that kind of leads us into another tool, which I'll make sure I link your Instagram in the show notes, but everyone needs to follow Kelsey's page because you do so many fun stories and things involving tarot. So I'd love to hear kind of how that has evolved for you, and then what you use tarot for now, either on a daily or weekly practice.
Yes. So tarot is a really interesting thing because a lot of people I have found have a very stigmatized view of tarot, and I didn't enter the tarot world with that. I didn't have any religious programming that was saying tarot is bad. Like, I came into it very neutral, so my entry point with it was different. So the reason I share that is because that's going to kind of that is context that I'm using to share what I'm going to share with you today. So the way that I neutralize tarot for everyone involved is this: tarot, like a deck of tarot cards. It's a stack of pretty pieces of paper to give you inspiration, spark new ideas. At its simplest, that's what it's for. I don't use tarot to predict the future. I don't use tarot to diagnose. It is a point in time tool in which we pull a card, we see what it says, and it's like, what's here now? Mm-hmm. It's a way to be just very present and curious in the now, in right here. I'll do things like Tarot Tuesday on my Instagram stories. I used to do a lot of reels with it, but it's just a way of just, again, to me, and one thing I love about it, especially sharing it online, is like, I'm writing up my own descriptions of what each card means. And again, that language piece or that word piece, like, if I can provide something that pings or ignites something in you, Mikhail, that makes you think like, oh yeah, what about this? Like, that is momentum that is starting to build, that just it leads to clarity, it leads to connection, it leads to greater consciousness. Like, it is a tool that connects me to all of those things that I love and I'm so passionate about.
Yeah. And it's fun too, because there are times where maybe you'll give which card resonates more, which number resonates more. And what's fun is it's another really low stakes, fun, playful way to, as I'm clicking through stories, be like, this one, and then you'll share a meaning about it. And it's pretty cool to test that intuition too. What made me click one instead of two, or what made me click this card instead of that, and feel more drawn to it. And then when I read the messages, I'm like, man, I mean, it's one of those things where, of course, as human beings, we're looking for patterns. We're looking for things that are going to apply to our life in some way. But it's also really cool to see even intuition kind of being playful in that situation and allowing it to be a way just to keep strengthening that and, have fun with it. So yeah, I really love that. Are there ways that you use it creatively, like, to prompt writing or to guide creative practice in some capacity?
Yeah. So a lot of times I'm using it as sort of I'll say like daily barometer. Like, I'll pull just like a card of the day, and it's just sort of like, am I missing something about the now? Like, am I, distracted, or is it affirming like how I was feeling or what I was thinking about? So I'll use it in that sense. But from a creative standpoint, I love to pull it in, whether it's tarot cards or oracle cards or things like that. Like, I love to pull it in as a place of like working with it. So you're asking a couple of different questions. First and foremost, like, what does this card even mean? Okay, I'm fact finding. Then you're going a little bit deeper. Like, what am I sensing about what it means? And then you're like really opening the lid on it and being like, okay, what else am I drawing connections with this from? And to me, that can be fruitful for all sorts of creativity. Like behind me, I have like some of my collages and stuff up, and that usually starts almost like a tarot reading, where I'm just like kind of flipping through a magazine, like ripping out random pieces, and then I'm looking at it and asking those questions of like, what's there to elicit that creative energy. Because the thing about creativity is that creativity and intuition operate on the same plane. So if you can tap into a creative place, you'll be intuitive. If you can tap into intuitive place, you'll find that creativity. Like they're sisters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also muscles that if we don't strengthen, they weaken.
Correct.
And feel like it's hard to find sometimes. And also in a world with so much intake constantly, we often don't even create the space for creativity. And during our writing group, I started doing a walk a day with my headphones in, but nothing playing. And it was kind of this symbol to me to tune out the outside world. And the amount of inspiration I would get in like a 15-20 minute walk would trump the entire rest of the day for creativity, because the entire rest of the day I would have meetings and be texting and be looking at things and intaking. And so while it's often uncomfortable to create that space because we don't do it unless we actually create the space, I think that those little moments like that can unlock so much creativity. And as you said, in turn, get a little closer to our intuition as well.
Yeah. Yeah. We fear silence and we fear a world with less noise, because what fills those gaps often is creativity, often is intuition. And those are things that speak truths to us that maybe we aren't ready to hear.
Mm-hmm.
But you paint a good picture with your, taking yourself on these walks, because a lot of times I think people think creativity or intuition is a luxury. Like, oh, I have to have the perfect setup. The vibe has to be right. Like I have to curate this experience. And it's not that at all. One of the practices that I encourage people to do is I call it receiving time. So sit at your desk for 3 minutes and just be open to something coming in.
Mm-hmm.
That's 3 minutes of time to connect to your intuition. That is not, literally everyone listening to this has 3 minutes that they can use to tap into that. And you're right, it happens. The alchemical nature of that experience happens very quickly, quicker than you think.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't need to be this like grand expression.
Mm-hmm.
We can tend to our creative, our soulful energy so simply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I often think that creativity is the vessel for some of that intuition to come in. There have been times I've felt prompted to create a mood board or a little vision board or some type of a craft. And what's the coolest thing about all of that is in the process of creating that, an answer to something I've been kind of mulling over will pop into my head, or something I've been ruminating over will just sort of disappear. And I'll have an actual moment of going, oh, I don't need to worry about that. And it's kind of like you said, it's a time to receive by creating, by getting back to basics, by working with our hands or doing something that is creation. Because again, if we don't create those 3 minutes, they don't exist in our day. And that's really a shame, because every single person has so much creativity just wanting to brew within them. And we often just like stifle it and shut it down.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
What are some of the other things that listeners could do to continue to kind of harness that creativity? Do you have any exercises you like, or, daily or weekly practices they could just even be playful and try?
Yeah. I mean, integrate the creativity into your morning pages. Is that if that's something that you want to integrate into your life, you can, in your morning pages, you can write poems, you can doodle. Like there's no rhyme or reason as to what that needs to look like. And it's just for you too. So if you used to like sketch little characters all the time as a little kid, like do that in your morning pages. Like bring back some of those things that you were so creatively connected to when you were younger. It doesn't always have to be things that you were connected to when you were younger, because maybe some of those things you don't have time or capacity to do now in your life. Mm-hmm. So creative expression, cultivating a creative practice can be super simple, and not to like totally be this girl, but like ask your intuition where to start creatively. For me, I all of a sudden, like I bought like a mini set of acrylic paints. Like this was years ago, and I started painting again, and painting evolved into watercolors, and watercolors evolved into sketches, and sketches evolved into collages and poems and writing. Like just follow where the ping takes you. Like that's that magic piece of it. Cards are a great way, like the tarot cards, oracle cards, things like that. Something I used to suggest doing is, do you remember when you were younger, did you ever work with those like alphabet cards?
Mm-hmm.
Like it would have like a big A and a little A and an apple on it. Okay. Like go to the dollar store, buy a deck of those cards and play with them. So you pull the letter F, like just do a word association game. Like that's a creative exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And just get back to that time where you're almost like a one-track mind. Like you're doing one thing. When we live in this society where we're doing 15 things, it's so nice to zone it back in and do something that is allowing us to be in this one track, so that maybe some other things can flutter in that have wanted to, and they've been knocking on our brain, but we just have too many tabs open for it to even access us. Slight segue, but I'd love for you to share your like belief or what you've shared about spiders. And then I want to kind of share what happened with my spider story.
Oh, amazing. Okay, yes, let's shift in. Why are we even talking about spiders? I am also a big believer in fostering my dream life. So I write down my dreams every morning. I pay very close attention to themes or trends that I see within my dreams. I like to interpret my own dreams for sake of what does this mean about my waking life. Also within all this intuition stuff are signs and symbols, and you see 444 on the clock, or you have like maybe you lost someone, and when you see a cardinal, that means something to you. So we're talking about symbology too. The spider story. So I am now one of those people that if I see a spider in my home, I'm going to save it. I'm not going to squash it. I'm going to take it outside. For many reasons, my Reiki master, when my grandma died, like so many things have gotten me to being this spider bug saver. My personal connection with spiders is twofold. One, this was a few years ago. I had this dream where I lifted my hands out of water, like they were underwater. So from a dream perspective, that could mean like unconscious or, the depths of me. And I lifted up out of water, so into the air. And as I lifted my hands out of the water, like millions of spiders started falling out of my hands. And from a dream interpretation standpoint, spiders are very reflective of like creativity, your craft, what you're dedicated to. You think about a spider, like, she's just up making her web, tending to herself, minding her business, like in her lane, like web, spider, catch bugs. That's the life. It's a beautiful creation that they are making all the time. So I was like, wow, okay, I'm like cultivating this like creative life, this intuitive life. It's a little bit freaky, right? In the dream, don't get me wrong. It was, at the time kind of feeling a little more borderline nightmarish, but it was so monumental for my life and my psyche. The other thing that happened, and I can't remember if I shared you that dream story or this next story, but it all comes together. This is like last fall, maybe. I'm at home and I see this like just huge spider, like the biggest spider I have yet to save in our house. And I'm looking at it. I've got like a paper plate and like a bowl. I'm trying to rescue it. And I swear to you, Mikhail, as I'm looking at this spider and I capture her, I feel it's a her. And I'm like, this spider is telling me something. Like this spider, I have a deep connection to. And I bring her outside and I set her on the ground, and I don't, spiders have so many eyes. So of course, maybe she was looking at me, but I feel like she turned and looked at me and was like we had signed a contract. I'm like, I just entered something with this like spider energy. And then from there, I had that evening, like a very fruitful dream. It brought in other symbols like with snakes, and the possibilities from here are endless. But the point of this spider energy, and I'm so excited to hear yours too, is like, that's another often overlooked place of presence is just our natural world. We've talked a lot today about money and these material things and lifestyle and business and things like that. But like, there's these very generative and informative and helpful creatures around us all the time that are tied to our intuition, that are tied to our creativity. And anyway, a lot of people are very scared of spiders. Don't get me wrong. Like if a spider like fell right now on the desk, I probably would yelp and then try to save it and take it outside. But I want to hear your thoughts on that, because this is the first time I've gone on air to share either of those stories, but also hear your spider story as well.
Yeah, I was previously somebody that kind of, no matter how big or how small, I just was like conditioned or raised. I don't know if we're raised to be one way or the other, but to just like kill the spider and throw it away or put it in the toilet, flush it down, whatever. And so I'd never really even paused. And it kind of, when I heard your perspective on unlocking creativity by saving a spider, or like if you save a spider today, maybe you'll be blessed with some little creative nudge, I realized how often we do things in our life just because that's how we've always done them, and we never question it and we never stop to think about why. And yes, spiders are freaky, so I understand that a lot of people would lean toward more of the like kill it and be done with it. But I also kind of likened that to a little bit of like a power play. And it's like, I'm bigger than you, so I can kill you and I can feel powerful right now and actually miss the whole point of what the message in this could have been. And so after I knew your perspective and especially the meaning of creativity and everything with spiders, I was then blessed with a wonderful opportunity. Getting out of the shower, I'm only wearing a towel and I look down and there's a spider just staring at me in the bathroom. And everything in me was like, next time, just kill this one and just go on with your day. But I was like, nope, I'm going to do it. And it ended up being a hilarious, probably 15-minute debacle because I grabbed something that was kind of flimsy and I was trying to get it to crawl on it, but then it would kind of crawl too fast toward me. So I'd freak out and I would drop it. And we did this little dance like multiple times into the hallway, into the kitchen, to the front door. Then I'm in a towel trying to get it outside. And I'm like, hopefully somebody doesn't walk by walking their dog right now. And they're like, what is this lunatic lady doing? But the coolest part about it is as I was doing that, it created presence for that probably 15-minute span that I would not have had otherwise. And the download and creative energy I got was this entire component to the fiction book I'm writing that will have to do with spiders. And as you know, there's like multiple characters, and part of me wanted to bring in this character always kills spiders without question. And it's very much like, what are you doing? Don't save it. And then there's another character that's very fluid energy, creative, all of these things, who is like, I will throw myself in front of a train to save a spider. And it was this really cool melding of like multiple things at once where I'd hit a little bit of a block in the book and was like, God, I need some inspiration. And then it just snowballed in this way that I'm like, it's like spider inception where I'm saving the spider to get creativity. And then I get creativity about a spider. And it just like was a really cool thing that now I feel like something has flipped in my brain and I'm a spider saver for life. And it's like, oh no, this is how it's always been. It almost feels now like there's no other way. And so I think really bringing it back around to how many things we do in life just because that's how we've always done them, it's even been a catalyst for me to pause and be like, why do I think this is the best way about, you know, all these different things? And could I challenge that maybe or do something a little different and see if the result is then different too?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And it's, you know, back to we were talking about mirrors, like this, the example with the spider is so reflective of this. If you want to cultivate an intuitive life or a creative life, like if you can cause that harm to a spider, if you can act that, you know, aggressively at another being, that is just a mirror for how aggressive and harsh you are being to yourself. So if in this example, if you liken a spider to your creative life and you're willing to just like slap it down, kill it immediately, shut it down, you're probably doing that to your creative spirit as well. Same with intuition. And I love that it was very, I like that you call it Inception too. That's funny. I'm thinking of that movie now. But that it unlocked something for you. And you know what? This is also too, like, why not try the intuitive life for this exact reason?
Yeah.
Why
I mean,
not?
exactly. Why not? And that's the thing. It's not harmful. It's not forceful. It's very receptive. It's just kind of allowing and seeing what comes in where maybe every day prior it was like do and see what the outcome is going to be. And how amazing to be able just to release that a little bit. And that's definitely the life I've been living lately, and surprised over and over and over at what comes in when I'm not grasping so tightly at everything around me.
Yeah.
Yes. I would love to know what your version of Red Nail energy is. So the thing that just makes you feel like you could walk into any room and hold your head high and look anyone in the eye. It can be internal, external, anything.
It's funny. I knew you were going to ask me this, and now I'm like, I'm slightly overwhelmed by it. A small one is literally like when I have my nails done. Like
and you
when
do
my
them
nails look nice.
remarkably.
I do them. Yes. When they're done, I just everything just adds up differently. I'll say that. The other thing is when I know that I have been living with self-respect for myself. So doing the things for myself that I need to, tending to my soul, not overextending myself, being a very, just like owning my shit as a woman, I can have red nail energy wherever I walk into. A phrase that I use that helps me get to that point is remember who you are.
Mhm.
And when I step back into that woman who I am and who I desire to be, like that to me is like, that's the lock and key for my red nail energy.
Mhm. Yes. Yes. 100%. Remember who you are. That's beautiful. Kelsey, anything else you'd like to leave listeners with? My favorite part of every conversation we have is always the intuition that comes through at the end. So no pressure.
I get the sense that there's someone or maybe multiple people who will have listened to this episode and they'll feel real fired up. You and I both have that inspiring, activating energy. And what my hope for you, for this listener is that you let this inspiration be something that allows you to take action, to take that chance on yourself and to do that next small micro action that's honoring that inspiration and that intuition that you feel. Please don't let this be another podcast episode where you just, you're feeling good, you're feeling high energy, and then you just go back to the same stuff. Let it be meaningful for your life.
Yes, I love that. And like recognize that extra step of action will lead to magic. It's the hearing about it or the listening to it and then changing the channel and moving on with your life that allows you to miss out on so much magic that's just right there on the other side of action.
Yes.
So
yes.
I love that. And lastly, where can listeners find you if they'd like to work directly with you or follow you? And all of this will also be linked in the show notes.
Yes. So a starting point I would say is my website, www.evermeco.com. On my website, I have something called the Apothecary. It's under the resource tabs. And that is just a hodgepodge of workbooks, guided meditations, classes that I've recorded. There's a human design class. There's a tarot basics class, like whatever you want to get into, there's just a lot there. Curate it to whatever it is that you need. And then I'm also on Instagram at everme.and.co. And that's the social media channel that I'm most present on.
Perfect. I would highly recommend all listeners go and check that out and follow Kelsey for all sorts of fun, creative daily or weekly musings. As always, it's such a pleasure, Kelsey. I am so lucky we were able to have this conversation and just appreciate you for taking time out of your day to talk to us.
Yes, of course. This was so fun.
So fun. And as always, Red Nail Energy listeners, you are seen and loved and not alone. And we will catch you on the next episode.